right, Greg, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Scott. Thanks for having me on. I'm excited to be here and excited to talk with you and your audience.
I'm excited. I think a lot of people are excited because you're about to give us a lot of hope that we could stay in shape when we get a little bit, not that you're old, but when we get a little bit older. Your
Mhm.
whole program is abs at 60.
Abs
And
at
so,
60.
and obviously for those who are watching on video, we're not gonna, we're not taking our shirts off and comparing because I don't want to be, I'm not gonna be embarrassed here. But yeah, you have probably better arms than I do. I mean, that's incredible. So those of you on the podcast, you should, and when it comes on YouTube, you should watch this on YouTube as well, so you can see the video. But basically, tell me about how you started, kind of why abs at 60. I guess why is this the brand that you're kind of going after?
Sure. Well, I just turned 60 in September of 2022,
Love that.
and yeah, and I'd always had this idea that my day would come, and I didn't fight a battle of kind of like we were talking about earlier, overweight. Really, my battle was more of a battle of self-esteem and belief in myself, right? And so growing up and as a teenager, I weighed 118 pounds. I mean,
Oh,
I was and I didn't have self-esteem at all, even going through my 20s and 30s. But I always had this belief that, if I took care of myself, one day would come. And so I scheduled a photographer to have some pictures taken for my 60th birthday.
I love
And I
that.
and I dieted, I really took it seriously, right? And I had been a bodybuilder in my 40, well, actually my 50s. So I knew what it took to get lean, right? And I did all of that stuff, even though I wasn't going to be on stage, but I was obviously going to be in front of a camera. When I saw the pictures, and there's one in particular that's going to be probably on the cover of my book, I'm like, oh,
Holy
this
crap.
is, yeah, kind of. It's
Holy
like,
crap.
wow,
Like
is
this
that
works.
me? Is that the 118-pound kid that was in
Wow.
high school? Right.
That's
And
amazing.
so I said, I want to share my story, and I want to share what I've learned to help other men not necessarily get abs. I use myself as an example of what's possible, but I don't really. I understand that for most people, their desire is really just to feel better, to look better, to you know, and that's a whole lot more approachable and attainable,
Hmm.
right? Than this whole ab thing, right? So that's really what I focus the book on. Then are what are the things that I think a man, anyone can do, should do, in order to get to look and feel better. And that's really what I focus the book about. And yes, there is a section. I have one chapter about how I did the whole abs thing, right?
Yeah.
But that's not really what the focus of the book is. It's really more about how do you look and feel better.
And I had a chance to read some of the book prior to this, and I think that when we say abs at 60, or when you say abs at 60,
Mm-hmm.
I think you put it perfectly. It's not necessarily about the oh, I need to get a six-pack abs so I can look really good. It's more so I don't want to use the word like an analogy, but like for living a healthier life. And that's really kind of where I kind of, when I was reading it, like the strategies that you use and kind of how you talked about it. Because a lot of people, when they're, at least when they're in their 20s, are like, I need a six-pack because that's where all the girls are or the guys are, and that's what
Yeah.
I want to be that person. But you're kind of
Right.
talking about it in a different perspective.
Sure. So when I really compacted the thinking, I've got this four-step
Yeah.
process, right? So and I call it dollar. Dream big, own your health, live well, and recharge often. And so what you were just talking about is the mental game, and that's what dream big is about. It's our beliefs and maybe what our limiting beliefs are, and that's what was true for me. There's a chapter about what do you believe and why, and then what do you want? So what do you want to look like? And in the book, as you may have seen, there's actually work. There's work sections after
Yeah.
each chapter, right? To
Mm-hmm.
to to be clear, detail it out. And besides, and the why is certainly really important here as well, right? We need that lever. We need that lever to know why we're going to go do something, because when times get tough, we need to remind ourselves, right? The reason why I'm doing this is because, depending on your age, I want to see my grandchild graduate from college, right? And those kinds of motivators are really powerful, and subconsciously they help us do the right things, and even biologically we're wired to achieve, right, when we set those kind of great goals for ourselves.
I love that. So you mentioned, I do want to go in deeper in kind of your
Sure.
4-step process. But before that, because I think this is really important to kind of preface the conversation of, you talked about how your issue wasn't really necessarily about losing weight. It was more about building self-esteem. And I think those two
Mhm.
things actually go very hand in hand. A lot of
Indeed.
people that I've worked with in my coaching program they might be overweight. They could be 50, 60 pounds overweight, or they could be trying to gain weight, whatever it is. And really the issue is a self-esteem issue. It's a mental issue. So whether they have trouble with fitness, have trouble with their diet, have trouble with their relationships, have trouble in life itself, it's all about their mentality, their mindset behind it. And
Mhm.
sometimes it's self-esteem. So I'm curious to your kind of path to your, let's say, and you mentioned you were a bodybuilder at 50, which to me is like literally insane, because I can't even imagine doing it now in my early 30s, late 20s, basically. So I guess tell us about kind of where you started with that low self-esteem, and kind of how you got to that point where you started bodybuilding, basically.
Thanks for the opportunity to share some of my
Yeah,
story, right? And
yeah.
and part of it is that I grew up in Huntsville, Alabama. My parents moved us there when I was 8 years old from Buffalo, New York.
Big destination spot there. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
well, and almost immediately I'm like, I'm sort of different here now, right? I
yeah.
mean, and so there was sort of that idea of not quite fitting in, being 100. I literally remember the 118 pounds in high school, right? And
It's
I
crazy.
wanted I wanted to be important in somebody, and I really became sort of invisible. I wasn't like the kid that got picked on. I was the kid that no one even noticed, right? So um, when I got out of college, I moved down to Florida, and one of the things that happened to me was I started drinking more than I should have been. But I also had a friend that was a runner, and he encouraged me to go run with him. So I did, and I went out, and the first time I ran with him, I ran 3 miles, and he's like, "Wow, that's pretty good." And so there started to become some tension in my life between, I could start to see alcohol dragging me down this direction, right? And running in particular taking me in another direction.
Mhm.
It seems sort of obvious, but it was really clear to me, if I went and was out drinking the night before, I wasn't going to run well,
Yeah, yeah.
right? But I felt it, right? And that was like kind of important. And I also had this experience where I was having some drinks after work, and I was driving home, and this was really important for me. I was weaving in and out of traffic, and just had one of those moments where the voice in my head said, "What are you doing? Right? This is dumb." So I immediately slow down to the speed limit, and I look over my right shoulder, and there's a state trooper staring at me, right? And I surely would have been
Oh man.
over the legal limit had it been pulled over, uh, and I wasn't. So I guess I was fortunate, and I didn't have. I got home and it was all good, but I realized that I needed to make a choice. So at that moment, I'm in my 20s now. Okay, I decided that I chose running and exercise as opposed to drinking it. And I didn't drink at all. Well, I shouldn't say necessarily at all, but for like 10 years, I had one or two drinks. I mean, it was
Wow.
really
Yeah.
hardly any, right? And I became really like motivated and committed to running. And then my friend, introduced me to a cyclist, and I started cycling. And that led to actually going into triathlon. So I was, and those sorts of experiences, in many respects, boosted my self-esteem for sure, right? Like, okay, I'm not pathetic, right? Um, but it didn't quite completely translate. I mean, I still was reluctant towards let's say, women. And even professionally, I just didn't have that belief in myself, even though I was beginning to get this really good reinforcement. Um, in I ended up well, in 2004, I quit my job. I I decided that I wanted to go to medical school.
Oh, wow.
I had read a book from Dr. Wofford, the Beyond 120-year diet. I think it's called the 120-year diet. He was the physician at Biosphere 2, where they were looking at could you self-contain humans in an enclosure, and could they survive? Could they grow enough food, right? And they were starving themselves to death, but they were actually fairly healthy. That book inspired me. Went down to Tucson to visit the site where they were, and I got really motivated to go back to school. And I took all of the medical school prereqs, and I'm in my 40s now, and applied to school. I didn't end up going, right? I mean, that would have been a big change. I wasn't I got an interview, but I wasn't actually accepted into medical school. So I had to go back to my old work. Another kind of important event in that time frame is I was volunteering for a lab, and they did bone density tests on me, and because they were looking at athletes, and I was diagnosed with low bone density. So I go to my doctor, and this is not good, right? I mean, bone density is a serious issue, and it usually affects older folks.
Mm.
And they were also discovering that endurance athletes, particularly cyclists, were having bone issues. So I was prescribed testosterone because my testosterone was low. That's what actually led to the bodybuilding.
Interesting.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. So I was actually on a work trip in a gym in Germany, of all places. And one of my colleagues was in the gym with me, and he said, "Hey, have you ever considered bodybuilding?" And I look around like, who the heck is this guy talking to? You talking to me? The 118-pound guy? And I'm like, no, what? And he said, no, you've got, you're looking good. You might want to consider doing this. And so in conjunction with the low bone density, that's why I gotten into the gym, right? Was to lift weights to improve my bone health. I decided, well, what the heck? I'll go ahead and give this a try. Now, I probably did about a dozen different shows, and I went to the national shows, and it was interesting to see the physiques. And there's different weight categories, and I was certainly in the smallest weight category. I never weighed. I mean, the smallest weight category is phantom weight is 143 pounds and below, and I was never in the category above that.
Okay.
Okay. So that's where I competed and got on stage. And there aren't many men who've been both triathletes and on the bodybuilding stage. They're pretty different, right? They're pretty different disciplines.
I mean, it's just such a massive because if you're running a lot, or even a triathlon, like you have a completely different almost body structure than someone who's like, I mean, not big and bulky, but big and bulky.
When I got at my first show, I met my bodybuilding trainer. He's like, "Come on, kid, here, I'll work with you if you want." And the very, very first thing he said to me, Scott, was, "No more cardio for you, Mr. Damian."
how does that feel? Like, how does that? Because you can't possibly do that much cardio. Like, you can't do it when you're trying to gain muscle.
Well, I had to learn that though. I had to convert and switch from 5-6 days a week of cardio to 5-6. Well, I didn't do 6 days a week of weight training. I would do 5 days a week of weight training, right? And that's quite a shift. Now, for me, I was flexible, I guess you could say, in that it's like as long as I felt like I was training my body in some way, it was still good for me. I was a good runner, but I wasn't like a world class runner, right? So it's not like I did actually.
What's a good runner? Real quickly, what's a good runner? Because I mean, I have a friend who does marathons. I've also done a handful of small distances. What's a good what's your pace? What's your distance and pace?
When I was running in my 20s, 30s, and 40s, I like to do the intermediate distance. I like to do 10K and half marathon.
Half marathon, okay, yeah.
Yeah. So my best 10K time at Boulder was 37:18 for 10K.
That's
like six.
Holy crap!
6:10 or something like that a mile.
Wow, that's
But
fast.
it is fast, and I can't do that today. And I was in the top 1% of runners in that age group. But in that 1%, there would be guys that were doing 5:10 a mile, a minute faster per mile, right? So that 1% is like this weird, asymptote where it just goes crazy. And so yeah, I was good. I actually did win a half marathon race. My time wasn't terrific. It was a small race, 300 runners, and I ran an hour and 27 minutes. My PR it was like an hour and 18 minutes
That's,
for
I
a
mean,
half
that's
marathon.
just for everyone to understand that when I ran a 10 mile last year, and this was the best I've ever done, I ran it in just on like 125, and that was like an 8 minute and 12 pace or something. It was which for me is like, oh wow, I'm killing it. You ran
Uh-huh.
3 extra miles in like 8 less minutes. So
So by comparison, last year, and congratulations, right?
yeah, yeah, I mean,
That's great. 10 miles is a lot of miles. Um, I ran a 10K last year as just a standalone race, and I was just under 45 minutes, and that's still what
that's still really good.
7:30 or something like that a mile. And yeah, I was pretty excited that I was able to do that. So
You said last
this was
year
last year, yes. This
at
year,
59. That must have been,
59.
that's got to be top 5% of age group. Easy.
It's a Yeah, I mean it's pretty solid, for sure. I did triathlons this year, so when I turned 50, I set a goal to beat the times that I set when I was 35, which I did in Olympic distance triathlon. The longest I've done is a half Ironman. Um, and this year, uh, by comparison, I was only doing sprint races. I mean, it's still taking me roughly an hour and a half to do. So it's not like it's a 15-minute sort of race. It's still
Yeah,
a
yeah.
pretty, lengthy
That's
event.
intense. Yeah.
Yeah, and I did four of them. I was pretty. I was second in my age group twice, third once, and I won my age group once. And so that's considering that there aren't lots of men doing triathlon at age 60. I'm pretty happy with that. Yeah.
Fair. No, fair
So
enough. That's amazing. So uh, so you got into bodybuilding. So I know I interrupted you there. So
yeah.
you were competing at the bantamweight, at in your 50s.
Mhm.
So
Yes.
what made you switch back? What made you switch back from? Well, first off, how are the competitions? How is the train? You said you're working out 5 days a week,
Sure.
lifting, no cardio. How is that transformation? How do you switch that?
It takes, especially as we get older, the transitions are need to be a little bit longer, right? To really abruptly change from one sport, introduce another sport is much more challenging. I hadn't swam in 8 years. I took a bunch of time off from triathlon while I was doing this bodybuilding. And when I got into the pool last spring, I could only swim for about 15 minutes, um, 3 or 4 or 500 yards, and then it's like I'm all right. I'm all tight and bound up, and,
I'm
and I'm
gassed.
I'm
Yeah, I
done.
can't.
I'm done. Yeah, but I kept at it, 2 3 times a week, and then within a couple of months, I was swimming almost the same as I was, 8 years earlier, right? So give it a little bit of time, and it helps to have some instruction as well, right, along the way. And I've had some coaches that have really helped me in a variety of ways, and everyone that does well pretty much has had some level of coaching, right? And
Yeah.
that's what we do as well. Yeah, just help other folks.
Why did you make the switch back? So you did bodybuilding, and then you went back to triathlon. So why switch back?
Um, well, what I learned, I mentioned I had bone density issues, and the testosterone bodybuilding brought me back almost to normal with my bone density. In 2012, when I did the year of triathlon, and to me, it was just more like, I want to see what I can do, right? And it just became a really great goal, measurable, and all of those sorts of things about a SMART goal. And the interesting thing, and I achieved my goals. That was awesome. I so I did that. When we measured my bone density, by the way, I had reverted back to being osteopenic. So One of the changes that I made from that point on was I said, I'm never going to not lift weights again.
Okay.
Okay. So I'm playing the longer game now. I was never going to win a triathlon anyway, and especially not going to win one in my 60s. So, what's more important to me now than necessarily taking a couple more minutes off my triathlon time is being able to achieve the goals that I want to achieve when I'm 80, right? And I talk about that in my book. I want to be able to hike 14,000-foot mountains. I want to be completely functional. I want to be able to travel. I want to be able to put that 40-pound suitcase overhead into a luggage compartment right on an airplane. I want to be able to carry
Yeah.
that
Functional.
up the stairs, right? So that I can go to Europe, right? Where, it's not an escalator everywhere. You've got to be able to climb. So I'm playing much more of the long game, and that experience of doing triathlon at 50 and getting my bone density measured, I think was a good reminder and a good trigger. And now I do both. I do both cardio. The sort of training that I've done this year has been 3 days a week of weightlifting, a pull day, a push day, and a leg day, about an hour. And if I can, I'm trying to do 2 swims, 2 runs, and 2 bikes. Right.
Wow.
Yeah, so I'm doing like 9 hours a week, 8 to 9 hours a week, and I take one day a week off. So that means like on the weekends, I'm still doing multiple sets. I can't do as much as I used to do, right?
Of course. Yeah. Of course. That's natural. Yeah.
Last Thanksgiving, I thought I'd go off and 4 days off. I'm going to go do these 100 miles and run all this, and I couldn't do it. And I listened to my body though, right? And I said, well, I'm going to do what I can do. I don't want to overdo it. Injuries can be big setbacks,
Yeah.
right?
For sure. No, absolutely. For sure. And it's good to listen to your body when it comes to that. So I appreciate you sharing that. I mean, it's an amazing story to be a bodybuilder in your 50s. I mean, I can't imagine doing it now when in my 30s, when it's just like, I can't even imagine doing it. So it's very impressive. And actually this year is in 2023, I want to run a triathlon. Once I'm done, I'm in rehab right now. So I'm trying to finish my rehab for my shoulder and my back. And then I'm going to try and do a whole triathlon thing.
Awesome.
And compete. Now, I don't ever plan on winning. Yeah, I appreciate it. It's just to do it. I want to do it because I want to test myself and I want to see it. Have you just real quickly, have you ever done like a Spartan race or like a Tough Mudder or anything like that?
I did when I lived in Colorado. I did it was a Tough Mudder. It was one of those adventure races up in the mountains.
Oh
It was
wow.
it was at 9,000 feet. We went up, and I didn't mind any of it. What I didn't like was the cold water. They had us get into cold water a couple of times, like 40-degree water.
Ew.
Right. That
That
was
sounds
that
that
was
sounds
my least favorite. But I liked that. I like that sort of race, so I've done some of those as well. Yeah, I like to do a little of everything.
what's the hardest thing like of all the like comparably of like okay like if it's the same level like a
Mhm.
Spartan race or a Tough Mudder versus like a triathlon, like what's harder, do you think?
I think it's harder for me. It's harder to train for those obstacle courses,
Okay.
right? Because to recreate those events is there's only so many places where you can do that sort of thing. So if you, I mean, I think I looked at those obstacle course kind of events as just fun challenges, right? As
Yeah.
opposed to like a race, right? So just something to go out and do.
Love that. Oh my god, yeah, I'm excited to do it this year. That's one of my goals is to do it in 2023. So, but so I want to hit back now. So you told us your story and everything, which is awesome. I mean, going from basically 118 soaking wet, no self-esteem to basically learning how to build your self-esteem and then competing and being this kind of, I mean, really at the top of your level athlete at 60. I mean, it's pretty impressive. So the dollar system,
Yes.
DOLR. So this
Yeah.
kind of what you used, or is it to get there, or is this kind of what you learned like looking back, this is like okay, this is what I'm going to teach people how to do?
I have to say it's the latter. When I kind of thought about the different components of health and fitness and wellness, this was the system that really made the most sense to me, right? To be able to share with people, right? Is this kind of an approach. So I talk, as you've seen in some, as you've read some of it, throughout every chapter, I talk about how it applies to me right? What the lessons I learned and why I think this is an important part. I also, because of my pre-med, if you will, background, I'm big on the science. I cite 175 different articles and references in the book to speak to. It's not just my opinion or my experience. It's also what does the science and the evidence say about these things as well.
Yeah.
So
Could you
yeah.
give us D is dream big, O is own your own health, L
Mhm.
is live well, and I think R
Yep.
is recharge often.
Yes, you got it.
Got it. All right, look at that. I remember. So with each of those, I guess, can you give us a summary of what each of those, just like what is that? What's the definition? Like, what does that actually mean to each person listening?
So the dream big, as we mentioned earlier, is really about the mental game here. It's defining at the end of that step. You're going to have defined how you want to look, why you want that, and which obstacles might be in your way of achieving that, or why you haven't done it so far, right? So that that is the end result of dream big. And I also include a chapter about the 4 minute mile, because every new horizon becomes, a barrier to us, in our, at least in our heads. And of course, everyone knows the story of Roger Bannister. I mean, he went out and did it, right? And broke the 4 minute mile, and now high school kids do it, right? So it's something. It's just a reminder for all of us that we can achieve anything that we really set our mind to. There can be trade-offs, however, and we just all I suggest here is just be conscious. If you want to be a Ironman triathlete, you can. That's probably going to come at the expense of some other aspects of your life, right? If you want abs at 60, what are the trade-offs that you're willing to make? So that's what I'm really trying to suggest here: is be clear about what you want and why. Okay, and that's in the dream big.
What would you say? And you mentioned trade-offs right just now, like, so,
Sure.
and I tell people all this, it's like what do you actually, the why is so important, because I think the why creates this level of discipline that builds the habits that then can get you towards your goal. Because motivation, I feel like motivation's fleeting, like you said, like when you're doing an activity, no one wants to get in freezing cold water to do something, or no, right now, like in Chicago, on the day of this recording, it is freezing cold outside. And like, I don't want to go to the gym. I don't want to warm up my car. I don't want to, and I'm not motivated to do anything, but I have my why. Why am I going to do this? So I guess in your experience, whether it's coaching people or writing the book or within, so what are some of the reasons that people like, what if people don't understand what their why is? Like, how do you break down those barriers? Because a lot of people just aren't honest with themselves. How do you get people to be honest with themselves about why they're doing what they're doing, or why they want to achieve what they want to achieve?
It kind of comes down to self-assessment. What have you achieved in your life? What do you think you want to achieve in your life? What's been holding you back? It's really, your life is a snapshot of really your beliefs. Where you are today is a function of what you believed, as well as, like you said, the habits that you've been performing, and that really brings you to where you are. It's a very personal question, right? The why. There's no good or bad answer there. For some people, it's revenge, right?
Hey, yeah.
Right. I want to get back at my ex, right? I want to show my ex that I'm really capable, and they were an idiot for dumping me. In a way, it doesn't matter. What is it that you're motivated by? And for some men, maybe in my group, um, if they're single, they don't want to be single, right? And they've known they've let themselves go. Hey, my motivation is to get into a relationship with someone I want to be with. Or, heard this a few times, my partner is actually, she's killing it, right? She's in the gym. I'm a little nervous that I'm not good enough for
Yeah,
her,
a little
right?
self-conscious. Yeah, okay.
Exactly, let myself go. Uh, and and there's other reasons, and to some degree, it can be, what is it that you really just want to achieve in life, right? And how can the health wellness component support that? We've all heard the stories of, um, an elderly person that wanted to see their grandchild get married, and they did. And 2 days later, they were dead.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's that mental component was what's driving them, right? They achieved what they wanted to achieve, and okay, now we're done, right?
They
Now,
willed themselves. They willed themselves. And actually, I think,
exactly.
and I have a very similar story to that. It's like, and I think it's, and I've lived through that specifically. My grandma was in the hospital, and within hours of seeing her, like me, my brothers, my sisters, my mom, my dad, like seeing her one last time in the hospital, we didn't think she was she passed within like 2 hours of us leaving.
Wow.
And she
I'm sorry for
actually
your loss.
yeah, this is years ago, and I appreciate that. But like, it's crazy. It's like this, we all thought that she willed herself to get one more visit in from us. And then she was like, I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore. Like, it's over. I don't want. And so, but you hear stories, people retire, and within 2 years, I think is the number, they kind of, their health goes down, they go down, and
Absolutely.
they pass away because their purpose is either
Gone.
fulfilled or gone. Yeah.
My suggestion for folks, especially in my demographic, is don't retire. I think a better word is transition.
Transition. Yeah.
Transition from whatever it is that you're doing to something that you want to do, or more of what you want to do from less of what you want to do. Transition is the right word. I had the opportunity 4 years ago. I got divorced. I sold all of my belongings or gave them away, and I moved to the Big Island of Hawaii. I lived on Hawaii for 3 months in a yoga center,
Ooh,
and I
okay.
could have done that for a while. And I just realized that for me, I wanted more stimulation and challenge, and I wanted to be around people that I love to be with, and so on. So I ended up coming obviously back to the mainland, but I had that opportunity to be more or less semi-retired, and so that's the last thing that's on my mind now. I mean, I'm really charged up about the things that I do, both with personally, my family, and with this coaching business.
I love
Because
that.
yeah,
I
thank
love
you.
that. And with the and the last thing on the dream big
Sure.
aspect, I wanted to kind of just make sure I really hit, because it's such a
Okay.
powerful point that I think it doesn't get talked about enough. And you really made it. There is a trade-off to everything that you want. If
Absolutely.
you're that person, and I talk about this all the time, if you want that six-pack abs, well, you have to give up something. It's not like it's not like willpower and alone is enough to do it, or discipline enough. You might have to give up drinking. You might have to give up going out. You might have to give up that part, or not do this,
That's
not do
right.
this. If you want to run triathlons, if you want to, whatever it is, right? If you want to be that good husband or that good, you have to give up something else. Like, there's something not, you can't do it. Not, I would say this. Most people can't do it all. There's usually a trade-off. The severity of the trade-off is obviously based on maybe a skill set of someone, like, was good with time management. But like, how do you talk to clients about that trade-off? Because I've talked to clients about it, and it's so hard to get them on board. It's like, I want to lose 40 pounds. I go, well, then you can't eat this anymore, or at least you have to trade off certain things that you love to do, and it's very difficult for them to wrap their heads around it. How would you have someone kind of go through that?
So I don't advocate for radical changes in
Of
people's
course.
life,
Yes.
right? Um, what and there's some different models that we can talk about in terms of, we got these different aspects of our lives: our family, our professional life, our personal and health, and our friends and spirituality, and these sorts of things. And there's only so much resource, right, to
Yeah.
to spread around. I think the goal here is not to deprive yourself
Yeah.
of anything, right? Is you need to, and so making small changes, I think, satisfies that, because anyone can park further away from the office door and get some extra steps in,
Ooh,
right?
I love that.
That's not a radical change, right? But it is a decision, you know? So we can decide that we want to put some emphasis, and maybe we're not going to put quite as much effort into these other aspects of our life, but we're not going to abandon them, because that's not healthy, right? And there's plenty of bad results that come from that, of bad relationships with our family, and so on. So I'm much more of an incrementalist,
Yeah, me
right?
too. Yeah.
And that's the kind of the nature of look and feel better. It's like, there's the 80-20 rule. There's some fairly small things that people can do to look and feel better. It doesn't take these massive changes and, doing Ironman triathlons and all of this sort of stuff, right? So
What would be
that's
your top three? Sorry, what would be like 2 or 3 things that people could do to look or feel better? Just like right now, like today, take like a good takeaway that you would give them.
sure. There's actually the simplest way, and I mentioned this in the cosmetics section, is just get a facial, right? Do something from a cosmetic perspective.
Interesting. Okay.
It's simple. It raises self-esteem, right? And it can set you down a path towards more success. So that's one, right? Is just to go off and do. There's a bunch of different sort of non-invasive cosmetic treatments, even just for a man, maybe it's shaving that gray beard off. Okay,
What do you?
you're good.
I'm feeling a little. I have a little bit of gray. You can't. So it's
Right. So cosmetics is one. And this gets into the live well, right? So really in the live well section of my program, the very first chapter actually is to be present and happy, right? Because it's great to have goals. It's great to be thinking of the future, but the reality is none of us know if we're going to be here tomorrow.
Mhm.
So, let's enjoy every moment that we have, or at least, find something in every day, right, to be thankful for and grateful for. So that's the being happy. And being happy is really a choice. So choose to be happy, right? That would be a second one. And then I would say also be surrounded by friends,
Like
right?
that.
Yeah. So
No, those are amazing things. I love that. So that's kind of the dream big, a little bit of the live well category.
yes.
So what about own your own health?
Yeah, so own your own health. I take the Jocko Willink approach here,
Oh,
right? Which is extreme ownership. Okay. Who's responsible for your health? I mean, there's only one person. It's me. I'm the only person that's really responsible for my health, and it's not my doctor. It's not the insurance company's responsibility for my health. All right, it's not my spouse, my children, my grandchildren, whatever. It's me. So it's first of all owning it. It's second of all acknowledging that there are professional people that can help us look and feel better. Your doctor wants to help you, okay? And if you tell him or her what your goals are, they probably will. So that's one of the principles in Own Your Health, is to have a good relationship with all of the folks that are available to you, and let them know what you're looking to do. Now, part of this here as well is I talk about hormones, and I'm on testosterone replacement, and that's not something you can do yourself. Body composition is also something that you need a personal trainer or a doctor can help assess that. And the cosmetics. So there are some cosmetic um, procedures that professionals do. So I will share. I've done Botox. I've done Botox for over 10 years. To both as a it works well that way as actually a preventative measure, right? So you can prevent wrinkles from actually the sort of deep wrinkles from forming, right? So Own Your Health is really about working with professionals and working with them in an effective way. I also talk about what's the best way to work with your doctor. And that's to be proactive. And one way to be proactive, I just said, is to tell them what you want. But the second thing is, like, especially with folks who are a little bit older, is if you're concerned about your hormones, get your blood tested in advance and bring the results to the doctor. Don't wait. Don't be passive and go, oh, well, maybe the doctor will prescribe testosterone, we'll do a blood test. Um, they probably won't if you don't have an obvious symptom. And in my case, I didn't have an obvious symptom. I had a random event, a DEXA scan, right? And once you got the data, then you can have the conversation. So that's my other point here, is to be proactive.
So
Yeah.
be proactive with, and if you don't know Jocko Willink, and I love that approach. It's basically like, no matter what happens, it's on you. Figure it
Exactly.
out. Don't blame the doctor. Don't blame. Like, you have to be proactive with your own health and figure things out. And I love that. So I love Own Your Own Health. live well. I know we talked a little bit about the live well. Is there anything else you
Mhm.
want to kind of go over in that category?
Sure. I talk about the present and happy and the relationships. Obviously, diet and exercise are a part of this as well. Um, and I talk about, there's a few things that we don't want to do. Based upon my earlier conversation, you can imagine that I'm not a fan of alcohol. I don't encourage people to drink. I think that, if you're a light drinker and it's not really having any effect on you, good for you. There's probably something else that you can focus on,
Yeah.
right?
Fair enough.
But if you're not drinking, don't. There's some folks out there that suggest that this is a key to longevity, and I would say that there's two things: stress management, right? What do people benefit from alcohol? Part of it is socialization, right? And part of it is maybe stress reduction. And my point is you can get both of those benefits from other approaches that don't involve alcohol, right? So make some relationships with other people, right, outside of a bar. Stress management is another aspect of live well, and choose the right level of stress in your life. So there's the idea of eustress. There's not enough stress is a problem for us. We get bored and sometimes do crazy things, and obviously too much stress is a problem as well. So choosing that right amount of stress in our life. Exercise, I'm obviously a big proponent of exercise, but I would never guide let's say a new client to, hey, you need to be emulating what I'm doing. What I would suggest is do what you like to do, right? If you like playing pickleball, great, let's go do it. Do it 2 or 3 times a week, and maybe work in some walking, work in, if you can, some weight training as well, right? So that weight training in conjunction with the cardiovascular work is super powerful. It's considered to be the most potent drug, if you want to use that word, that we've got.
The key to
So why not
longevity.
take
The key to
yeah, why
longevity.
not
Yeah.
take advantage of it?
I love that.
Sure.
Oh, I mean, it's powerful stuff. I mean, it really is. And I love the idea that, it's like whatever you do, whether it's pickleball or it's running, it could be like, you don't have to be a triathlete or a bodybuilder.
No, not
Like
at all.
what do you like to do? What would you say to someone who's like, I don't like any of that. I want to sit in my house. I don't want to do any of that. But they also want to stay healthy. Like how do
Mhm.
like, and that's and a lot of people like that.
Sure.
How do you guide that person?
Well, I think one of the questions I would ask them is why? What is it
Yeah,
about,
huge.
right? What is it about the exercise that you don't like? And, if we ask why a couple times, we might get down to the root cause. And some people don't like to get sweaty, you know? Well, all right. So why don't we think of some things that get you moving that don't get you sweating too much? Maybe you have you're self-conscious about how you look and you don't want to go to the gym. Okay, that's understandable. So in that case, I would suggest, well, maybe there's a personal trainer that's got a private kind of gym, right? That might make you feel more comfortable and less judged,
Hmm.
right? If you're feeling that way. So it really is kind of peeling back the onion to understand what's going on, and then finding something that is going to be appealing to the client, right? And then starting small. And I love the tiny habits approach of, maybe what we do, if the idea is to get you walking a little bit, maybe for the first couple of days, the idea is put your shoes on and walk to the mailbox. And that's it, right? And then a few days after that, you walk to the mailbox twice, and not to get the idea that, hey, this isn't so bad, right? And starting small can be a really powerful approach. It's like,
So you love the small steps that
I do.
basically create momentum, which then
Exactly.
gets you going over and over. I love that. No, I think it's a great method. Those small wins keep you going, and it proves to yourself that you can do it. And it's like, okay, I can do this. Like, that's not a big deal. Like, why did I?
And there we can also put some leverage on ourselves as well, right? So rewarding ourselves for those kinds of behaviors is really powerful. And maybe one of the things I talk about in the aesthetics is, some people may not feel that they're worthy of a nose job or whatever it is, right? And so one way to reward yourself is say, look, maybe I'm going to get to the point where I can walk 2 miles. And when I do that, then I'm going to go and have that conversation with the plastic surgeon about, fixing my nose. Right. And so all of these things can build on themselves. And it's really a matter of building self-esteem and doing that within the context of not turning someone's life upside down, because I don't think that's sustainable.
Helpful.
And I don't think most people are really interested in that.
I
Yeah,
agree 100%. No one wants to just be like, oh, you have to do this. So there's no other, like, there's always a way to make, small progressive steps to not, oh my God, this is so stressful. This is so crazy. And I can't do it. It's like, no, hold on. When I ask you to run a marathon tomorrow, it's how do we get you out of bed? How do we get you making
exactly.
that next step? And so, but most people think it's like running a marathon. I use running the marathon metaphorically, but like, it's like most people think losing that 40 pounds, that they think of it in totality. Well, it's like, well, hey, why don't we just worry about the next meal? Why don't we just worry about the next day? Why don't we just worry about what we can do versus trying to figure out how long it's going to take? Let's just keep the next steps in line.
And I know that there's some studies that show that the most benefit from exercise is getting out of the basement, so to speak. So if you're in the bottom 20% of activity level, getting to that next level of activity is where the most bang for the buck occurs from a
Wow.
health outcome perspective, right? It's
Wow.
certainly not going from the fourth to the fifth level, right? I mean, the incremental improvement there is far smaller than going from the bottom to the next rung up the ladder.
Which makes a lot of sense, because I think the number is more specifically, and this might be exactly what you're talking about, but I think it's if you were to walk for 20 minutes a day, intent walking, not like 20 minutes total. Like if you were to do intent 20-minute walking a day, I think you lower your risk for chronic disease by like almost, it's like 40%. I mean, it's a crazy number decrease. And that would be going from one rung to the next rung. And that's a huge, but again, as you get more in shape, it's not going to be as effective as you do more and more and more. But it's still, yeah, that's a good point. So if you could just get started and get moving, you're going to decrease risk and get healthier at a much higher rate. It's a good point.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
The last part, the R, the dollar, the moneymaker, the recharge often.
So one of the things that I've really learned a lot about is sleep. And sleep is considered not one of the pillars of health anymore, but it's considered the foundation. And if we're not getting enough sleep, that we're at severe risk actually of a number of diseases. So, what is enough sleep? And what the research has shown is that 7 to 8 hours a night of actual sleep time is the so-called sweet spot of sleep, right, where we get the most benefit.
Yeah.
One of the things I started to do is wear the Aura ring. So I used to have a watch and I don't like sleeping with a watch. The ring I don't mind. So now I have these metrics that I get every day that tell me how much sleep, not only how many um, hours and minutes of sleep, but the different kinds of sleep, because REM sleep is really important in addition to light sleep and deep sleep. So that's one of the four. Sleep is one of the four components of recharge often. The other two of the others are sort of related. It's prayer and meditation. So this is a way of managing our stress. Having a spiritual practice, and I'm not dogmatic about, oh, it's got to be this one or that one. Have any one, and it's probably going to help you relate to people better and possibly be a better person. And then the other one that some people may find a little interesting is having healthy sexuality. So having healthy sexuality has shown people to make people feel better about themselves, and they actually will look better, right, when they're in healthy sexual relationships. So so those are the four components of recharge often. But the sleep one is the one that I've really been focused on personally. Not that the others aren't important, but and I've learned how much time I need to sleep, and that would be a takeaway. So, talks in terms of takeaways for your audiences, is to do a little sleep inventory. When are you going to bed? When are you getting up? And know that a good sleep efficiency is like how many what percentage of the time are you actually sleeping when you're in bed? Because just because you're in bed doesn't mean you're sleeping.
Yeah.
And I've learned if I want to get 7 hours of sleep, I better be in bed about 7 hours and 45 minutes. And that's what the metrics have shown me. So, and there's lots of ways to improve sleeping, like making sure your room is dark, your room and your bed is comfortable and cool, and not doing certain things like eating late in the day, caffeine. I've learned that caffeine, I've always known I've been sensitive. I didn't realize how sensitive I was to caffeine until I started tracking my sleep. So those are
I heard
some
caffeine has like
ideas.
a half-life of like 12 hours or something. And so like you could take it at midnight, you could take it at noon and it will still be in your system at midnight. And it's just like, and it like wreaks havoc on your body or something.
Everyone's different, and this is one of the things that I avoid making these sort of dogmatic statements that you must do this, especially when it comes to diet, exercise. Um, for me personally, I can tell when I've had a cup of decaf coffee because there's still caffeine. There's a little bit of caffeine in a cup of decaf coffee. So even at 8 in the morning, if I'm going to bed at 9 or 10 o'clock at night, I can feel my heart, my blood pressure, my pulse a little bit higher just from a cup of decaf. And that's part of being, sort of tuned into your body.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and, that's just an observation that I've made. It's certainly not necessary for everyone to do
No,
that.
no, it's great. I love it. I have no reference point on anything with coffee or caffeine because I don't do it. So
Okay.
I have no reference point to that. So I'll take your word on it. And it's interesting because I've heard a lot of people have similar things that they're very sensitive to it.
Mhm.
And they take it too late that they're not sleeping well either. So,
Alcohol is another problem for sleeping.
yeah.
And one of the most interesting things, and I'll share this, the last one I'll share on sleep, is one of the issues with short sleep when we're getting like 6 hours or less of sleep is REM sleep. I've learned is predominantly experienced later in our sleep cycle. So if we're only getting 4 or 5 hours of sleep a night, we're hardly getting any REM sleep. And that's a problem because REM sleep, and when we dream, we're dreaming in REM sleep. One of the awesome things about dreaming is those guardrails get turned off, right? So we're thinking, in our normal everyday life, we've got all these guardrails. We have to think, inside the box. And the reason why our dreams are so crazy is because those guardrails get turned off,
Yeah.
right? And so a lot of creative people in particular will suffer if they're not getting enough REM sleep. Edison used to actually wake himself up during REM sleep. This is the story, so that he could remember the sorts of things that were going on in his dreams. So yeah, it's fascinating
How do you
stuff.
wake yourself
He
up though?
used
Like
to.
this.
The story went that he used to sleep with like a ball in his hand, and when he would fall asleep, and I guess in REM sleep, the ball would drop and he'd wake up. So there's another. It's a fairly popular book called Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker, and he talks about, of course, all things sleep in that book, and that's one of my references in my book, actually, as I mentioned,
Oh,
Dr. Walker's book, and he talked about Edison and the
interesting.
REM sleep effect.
I
Yeah.
love that. So sleep being a foundation of the recharge model. So I love it. I love the system. Dollar system, DOLR. I
Mm-hmm.
love that. Where can before we head off here, where can people find you and learn more?
Thank you for asking. My website is absat60.com, just ABSAT60.com. And I'm also at Instagram, Greg Damian, absat60. So those are two good places for people to go.
All right, awesome. And all of that will be in the show notes as well. So feel free to just click on those to follow Greg. Any final thoughts?
Scott, thank you. You've been a terrific host. I think you've brought the best out of me, and I'm really grateful for the opportunity to have spoken with you and your audience today.
No, absolutely. You've been amazing. A wealth of knowledge, and I appreciate it. And like, just it's inspiring because like people can, when people get in their 40s or 50s, it's like, oh, I can't get in shape. It's like, well, I mean, you are literally living proof that that's
Talk
not
to
the
me.
case. So
I'd be
yeah,
happy to share. And I'm so as a last thought, I'm happy to be able to be in this position to help show people what's possible at 50 and 60 and hopefully 70 and 80. Right. I'm happy to be that role model. And if people want to talk about, how it could apply to them, I'm all ears and happy to have those conversations with folks.
Absolutely. Greg, thank you so much for the time today.
Thank you, Scott. Take care.